Good evening. Welcome to WSBI, your resource for success podcast program, where you get to meet inspiring women-owned businesses from across the country. And now, for your host, Kimberly McLemore.
All right, good evening and welcome to WSBI, your resource for success podcast program, where you get to meet inspiring entrepreneurs and women-owned businesses from across the country. I am your host, Kimberly McLemore, President and CEO of the Women's Small Business Initiative, LLC, and award-winning author. And welcome to another night of sharing. With us, we have special guests, my co-host, Miss Natalie Montez. We have Constance Contursi and Jerome Brown, fitness studio owner and president, co-host of Too Fit to Be Tied podcast. Constance Contursi and Jerome Brown, veteran fitness pros, they take a lighthearted approach to discussing physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual health in their podcast, Too Fit to Be Tied. Both have dedicated their lives to helping people to become the best versions of themselves, which often starts by creating healthy habits, not just in their own physical bodies, but many times in the relationships around them. So without further ado, please help me welcome to my platform all my amazing special guests this evening, Miss Natalie Montez, Miss Constance Contursi, and Mr. Jerome Brown. Well, good evening, you guys.
Hello.
Thanks for having
us. You're welcome. Now, I know there's four of us, so we're all going to have to raise our hands before we start talking, right? just like we're in school. So again, I really do appreciate you all taking your time out to have this discussion. As we talked a few minutes before we actually started this, that we are in the month of October, and we know that in the month of October we have domestic abuse awareness as well as breast cancer awareness. But tonight our focus is going to be on unhealthy habits, and the focus is really truly going to be focused on domestic violence. And so before we get started, though, I would love for everybody to take the time, just take a couple minutes and tell us a little bit more about who you are. I'm going to start with my lovely co-host, Miss Natalie Montez. Give us a little, chime in and information about who you are, Natalie. Welcome.
All right. Thank you so much. It's always an honor to do a show with you, Kimberly. You and I have known each other for years, many years, and done a lot of work together and still working together. So these conversations are always amazing to have. I am retired Air Force. I was living in Chicago when I met Constance, actually, and now I'm back in Virginia. But she came to mind like right away when we were discussing having this as our focus for the month of October. But so again, just a little bit about me. I'm a mom, a single mom of two. I have a 15-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I have gone through my own experience with toxic relationships and abusive sort of, situations that am still growing through and healing from. And so this conversation is near and dear to my heart as well. And I'm happy to say that, I've crossed over to safety. However, it's still a journey, and I'm still on that journey, and a lot of us still are, and a lot of people out there still are. So I'm excited to have this conversation to share with our communities.
All right. Yes, I believe you understand. And we'll get into my story a little later, but let's go ahead and Constance, come on and tell us a little bit more about who you are.
Sure. So I am the owner of a fitness company called Hit It Fitness. And I am a coach, basically. I am a trainer. I'm a life coach. And what makes a good coach is somebody who actually has gone through some of the similar situations and has struggled. If you haven't had the struggle, it's really hard to coach others that are struggling. I like to say I was born into toxic relationships. I come from a very narcissistic mother and a very, very toxic sort of upbringing. And that's where Too Fit to Be Tied came into play. And I sort of, found myself married twice in equally toxic relationships. And Jerome and I hooked up and decided, you know what, we are going to start this podcast to try to help people. So thank you for letting us be a guest. This is really different for us. being the ones interviewed.
Yeah, I understand that feeling.
So
It's
awesome.
always fun, though. It's always fun to have the opportunity to tell our stories, because I think a lot of times, people don't realize how real we are and what we've been through. And, even though people come to us and talk to us about certain things, they just don't always understand our journey. So this is a great opportunity for people to hear our side of the story. So Mr. Jerome Brown, welcome. Tell us a little bit more about who you are, sir.
Well, thanks for having me. I am a personal trainer. I do some work with Constance at her studio. I'm also an independent in-home trainer. Also am a musician, and again, you live right outside the Chicago area. I've known Constance for about, 20 years or so, somewhere around there. And it just so happened we started we were in the fitness industry together, and we kind of just sort of being in the same industry, would just sort of orbit around and sometimes be in the same place and sometimes not. And at one point around the beginning of 2020, we connected and started sort of sharing stories. I had gotten divorced toward the end of 2019, and we started talking about our relationships. And for us, I know it sounds a little weird, but we were laughing at each other's stories. I mean, it's as crazy as it sounds. And so that was the genesis of our podcast, is sort of sharing these stories, and taking a humorous approach to these subjects that are sometimes, pretty heavy, but also trying to help people at the same time. And just highlighting some of the things that we've been through, just because I think a lot of times people go through things and they feel like they're the only one.
Absolutely.
And and when you start to share those stories, you go, oh, I'm not the only one. And sometimes you don't realize how bad it is until you hear yourself say things. So I don't know, that may have been a little more than you wanted.
No, that's
hopefully.
fine. It's actually a great way to kick everything off. I mean, you guys have an amazing relationship as friends, and here you guys have bonded through, unfortunately, we find ourselves sometimes bonding through tragedy, right? But to take that tragedy and turn it into something positive is the most important, because there are so many people out here who have been abused in different ways. I'm a domestic abuse survivor. It's what they call us. I don't particularly like the word survivor, because I was surviving. I was going through being, beat down and on all that craziness. And I'm way beyond the survivorship scenario. But I think that what people need to understand is that, like you said, they're not alone. And if we can't sit back and talk about what we've been through, we have to share our voices, and other people don't have that capability just yet to do that. They don't have the will or the power, and don't know how, some of them. So being able to have these type of conversations, whether we're laughing about it or crying about it, whatever that journey may take us through, it's the most important thing is to get the information out, because every single day we're constantly hearing about people who are being abused, people who are being killed, over something of nothing enough more of just control, just that ridiculous of, I owe you attitude, control. And then if we don't know how to deal with that and don't realize that we can share these stories, because being silent is not the answer. And I believe that's where most people make their mistakes, is being silenced.
Yeah, I really feel like there's like one simple thing, and it's not simple in practice, but it's one simple thing that can save lives, and that's sharing. And I've learned, that by being a part of some of the women's support groups, that I'm not alone. And it's just like what Jerome said. I really thought I was alone, and I didn't tell anybody what I was going through on the inside of my four walls, And so sharing, I feel like, has really helped a lot of people laugh their way through it, as well as cry their way through it, but most importantly, know that they're not alone.
Right. But I think the thing for me is the end result is, how did you come out of it? What have you done to improve yourself? And then other things that you're doing to help improve others. So Constance, tell me a little bit more about your story, your personal journey. You mentioned early on that you come from a family of, abuse and narcissistic and all that. So tell us a little bit more about your journey, and then where how you got to today as well.
Sure. I mean, how much time do we have?
Well,
Oh, gosh. I mean, I'm 41, so I could start from day one.
okay.
Well, to make a long story extremely short, when you are in an abusive situation, people from the outside, it's funny, Jerome and I were just at a barbecue and somebody said, well, explain a narcissist. And we tried to explain it and he couldn't wrap his brain around it. And he was like, I just don't get it. They don't sound that bad. And we sort of laughed to each other because we're like, it's almost like you're blind and you're trying to explain the color of the sky to somebody who's never seen before. It's not possible. And, I kind of wish I was that guy. I wish I was that naive and that, and that inexperienced, because I wish I never knew what this was. So when you're sometimes even in it, you don't even know it's abuse. And I think that that's how it started for me as a child. I had parents who were very heavy with the belt, very, you're either all good or you're all bad. It was like living with two complete narcissists. And so I grew up thinking that was normal, and I would go to people's houses when I was a kid and think, I'm like, why are your parents being so nice to each other? Is it because I'm in front of them? Like you have an audience? Because my parents do that too. But when people leave, the cops are coming over, it was really, really bad. So I remember, I'll tell you really quick, one time I was young. I was probably 10 years old. And my dad was angry because of orange juice. I drank all of his orange juice, or I overfilled the orange juice when I was serving it to the friend who I had over at my house. And he pushed me so hard down the stairs. There were about 22 stairs going down the basement. Yeah. And I popped up and my friend was like, what happened? I was like, oh, I just fell down the stairs. And they're like, I feel like your dad just pushed you. And I was like, well, he just gets mad. And at the time, I really didn't think anything of it. I was just like, well, I must have done something that was inappropriate and I deserved that. So fast forward, I've been, 19 years old. I'm married and I'm married to somebody in a similar situation. And to me, I was like, well, he doesn't hit me. He doesn't touch me. So it's not abuse. And then fast forward, I'm divorced and I'm remarried. And we get into very, very same thing. You're either good or you're bad. When you're bad, you don't deserve things. And you don't deserve to sleep. And you don't deserve to watch television. And you don't deserve to eat this food. And you don't deserve to have your car keys so that you can leave because we're arguing. And all of that to me felt, I knew that was wrong, but it was never abuse. He never actually punched me. He used restraint. He pushed during fights. He used his force, but I fought back to protect myself. And so I kind of thought maybe I was the aggressor. Maybe that's because I can't control my own emotions. And so you go through therapy, years and years and years of therapy, to find out that history is basically repeating itself. And you're stuck in these situations that you think are normal because that's what your norm was. Right. So my biggest lesson was that domestic violence isn't getting punched in the face. And to me, that was what I would define. If you had asked me, years back, I would have defined it like that. And I would have said, oh, I would never be in a situation like that. Only to find out, here I am.
Right. But what you're saying is exactly right, because people always equated that, you're abused, because you're beat up. Domestic violence is strictly about the hand of the fist. And then it's absolutely the opposite, because it starts at the level of emotional, then it gets into the physical and all the other things that come with it. It has steps. You just don't not everybody automatically just starts beating you down, but at the same token, it starts somewhere. And like you were saying, even within your home environment, that was the norm for your parents. That's all they knew. So you thought that was the norm. And then you grew through this process of even going through 2 marriages and realizing, oh, well, I'm right back in the same situation. So this must be just what life is about and what relationships are about. But reality, obviously, that's not the truth. But when you're constantly being told and society tells you, oh, well, did they hit you? So what does that got to do with, why do they have to hit me in order for you to pay attention to the fact that I'm being abused every day? And then
totally. I had that same.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry about that.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say I had that same exact experience. I got to the point where I needed help, and I went to his office, his HR department, and they said, well, is he beating you? And I said, well, no, but there's all of this stuff going on. There's fear. I'm having to lock my bedroom door. I'm having to, all of these things. And they're like, well, if you want to change your story to tell us that he's beating you, we can help you. Otherwise, I think you're fine. So I was like, wow. So I don't wear my scars on the outside, then I'm not in an abusive situation, a scary situation, a dangerous situation. That was very, very hard for me to feel like I was trapped, like no one is going to help me,
Right. And that's because in each state too, as well, their laws are not all the same. There's still many states that they give the aggressor, the abuser, has more rights than the person who's been abused. So that, there's still a lot of them that are stuck in that scenario of, well, they didn't beat you down, so you look perfectly fine to me. So what's the big issue? In the military is no different. To be honest, look how many years it's taken in women to get as far as we have when it comes to your hair. All the things that you would think there would be, ridiculous that you would even have to fight for. It's just, and then having to hear these type of stories, there are so many women who are constantly going, and men who are going through the same things. But when we're not communicating that, we don't talk about it, we don't know who to go to or who we can depend on. It stays within until you have no choice. But the problem is there are so many women and men who are being abused that don't get that opportunity to talk about it because they're 6 foot under, and that is the problem. So people like us, I think to some degree we feel like we have a responsibility, but I think for me, the biggest thing that when I was going through the part of being abused, it was getting this individual off the street. The biggest problem I see with most women that I've been encountered to is that they feel like, well, I got to stay. And then if I stay, I'll let them in. If I want to get rid of them, I just want them to go away. They don't ever go away unless you are accountable for taking the steps that you need to take and to ensure that you are safe and that other people are safe.
Right. And then the support side, because like Constance was saying, they want to punish you, and that doesn't stop just because you leave. They find a way to punish you for as long as, if you have kids together, for as long as the kids are, underage and minors, they will find ways to punish you. So that support system, getting the word out there, giving language to what people are going through, because it wasn't until I had never heard of narcissists before. I had never heard of gaslighting. I didn't even know. So it was so important for me to actually have someone sharing before I realized, oh my gosh, this is what I'm going through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the issue is sharing isn't as easy as people think.
Right.
People will say, why didn't you say anything? We're all doing a podcast. I'm just pray that my ex doesn't listen to mine, because if he did, or listen to this one, because then you have no idea what I'm doing. You all may, but most people who maybe have not been in this situation don't realize what we will have to endure when we are trying to co-parent with one of these individuals, because if they get wind of the fact that we are sharing our story, you are really putting yourself out there, and it can really be dangerous. So a lot of people don't speak out. There are tons of people that we have that are like, I'd love to be on your podcast, but I can't. I just can't share my story. If my, ex finds out, it could be life or death for some people.
Right. And that is the truth. And I think, like I say, and that's the other thing. We all realize that everybody's situation is different. We all can agree that abuse is abuse, but at the same time, that, like you said, when we have people who need to be able to communicate, they can't really communicate because we don't really know what their circumstances are. But I think, what I had learned in the situation that I went through was that the first thing they had told me, dealing with the legal side of it, and all the advocates on my side, were that, you have to follow through with this, because otherwise we know there's going to be more victims down the road. And of course, as you've been victimized, you don't realize, especially when I consider a pro at being an idiot 24/7, they've been doing this for so long, they consistently think that they can get away with it. And I had to, pull up my big girl panties, as I always say, and you know what, I got to do this. I have to save not just myself, but somebody else, because I know that this individual is not going to stop. So I went through the legal realm, and I was fortunate enough to get this individual 10 full years of prison time. So not everybody's that fortunate, but I had to fight that fight, even through the process of being stalked, him trying to come and kidnap me at knife point. I went through hell to get through this, but I knew at the end of the day that I couldn't be afraid anymore. And that was the key. Is that when you start to realize your strength, you realize who you are and what your capabilities are. And I believe Constance said, your fitness place is about being a badass, right?
Right.
I had to have that moment of being a badass.
Yep. Yeah. Well, my issue is that I'm touting being a badass, so I can't tell people what's going on in my in my home. Like, I'm supposed to be some badass, like I got to uphold that image. I mean, Jerome and I talk about this all the time. Like, he has been through his own situation. For a man, what's he going to do? Go to the police and tell them his little wife is, emotionally, I mean, how do it's such a touchy subject.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Well,
And Jerome, I want to hear. I want to hear your side, Jerome, because I think that's the other thing is we don't hear enough about what men have gone through. So definitely tell us about what your journey was.
Well, and I think one of the things it's sort of not socially acceptable for men to talk about things, and so we don't. Now, my story, I didn't deal with physical abuse. It was more emotional instability, which just created a lot of chaos, and not talking about it, trying to keep up that appearance. I was one of those people that wanted to make sure everything was okay. Wanted to make everyone think that everything was okay, everything is under control, and so just dealt with a lot of emotional instability that that walking on eggshells, so to speak, and I didn't really realize how things were until I started to talk about it. So so we're in the process as we're getting divorced, and I finally had to talk to somebody about it. So I started to call my siblings, who I trust. And, and there were times where I would get done with work and I would just go and sit in the parking lot for hours because I couldn't go home yet. And, and talk to my, and talk to my siblings. And one of the things about, sharing your story is I've said this before in our podcast, is when you hear yourself say things out loud, then you go, oh, that's really bad. And then my journey of getting out of that, and it's not a victim blaming sort of a thing, but I had to figure out why I allowed those things to happen. And so, so I went to therapy for a while. I read every book on every, psychological personality disorder, sorts of things. And for me, just being alone has been a huge thing. We actually did a podcast about this yesterday. Not having, and this, I guess maybe everyone's different, but for me, not having someone around allows me to go, inside, and I meditate every day, and starting to think about these things. Like, I didn't come from a background like Constance did, where her parents, she saw her parents doing these things. Right. If you would look at my parents, you'd go, oh, those are great parents, and they were. But my sort of issue was that I was one of those kids who, growing up, was, I got straight A's, and I figured out how to do this, and I taught myself how to do that. And so my whole mindset was, I need to do something in order to be loved. And so, and so I find myself in this relationship where I'm constantly trying to please this person, and it's never good enough.
Right.
And And it was only recently that I found out, oh, that is why you allowed that to happen, because you kept saying, oh, I can fix this. I can make her happy. I can, I can get that good grade. I can get, I can get the approval.
Yeah.
And I sort of trace that back to, because I was so focused on achievement, I didn't have a genuine sense of self-love that just came from, I just love me just because I am me. Not because you can do this or not because you can do that, but because I am me. And and people talked about self-love, I didn't even know what that was. If you ask me, I'm like, oh, well, I like that I can do this, or I like that I'm this way. It's like, no, but do you just love yourself just because?
Right.
And that's been, the journey for me to say, I love myself now just because. Because I think in a lot of cases, if you hear someone else's story, you get we look at other people's stories from a different perspective. As a friend or someone we care about, and we go, oh, I would never, put you through that. Or,
right.
but if you were able to look at yourself and hear your own story and say, I love myself too much to allow myself to be put through that. I was not at that place, and that's where I needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's not. I don't look at it. I hope that doesn't sound like victim blaming, like you
No.
made this happen because you didn't love yourself. But
No.
I know just the way, if I don't have children, but if I had a child, I would go, oh my God, I can't. I don't want you to go through that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I needed to see myself
your journey
in that way
through to discovery. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the key is,
I didn't mean to monopolize too much time there.
No.
Wasn't too long an answer.
No, not at all.
No,
I
please
do
don't
have a question for you
that.
both, though.
Go ahead. Say that again.
Okay.
I do have one question. So you guys have joined forces under the umbrella of emotional health and bringing awareness to your communities on the subject of domestic violence. What approach do you guys take when you first start working with someone who has been in the trenches and the depths of hopelessness, as we all have in our own journeys? Like, what approach do you take to help someone take that first step?
Well, it doesn't always work, unfortunately. We used to have a narcissist support group. That's what I don't even remember what we called it, Jerome. But that's how we kind of started. And it would be like, we would look at each other and be like, we want to help these people, but they don't want to help themselves. A lot of them just couldn't get out of their own way, and for me, I feel like, we will recommend reading materials, because sometimes you read a book and you're just like, that's my life right there. Somebody has just explained exactly what I've lived, because it's very hard for people to understand. And I think educating yourself, that would be, for me, the number one thing to try to help people that we coach, or when we try to get, our message across. It's just all about education. And I think that's where we come from. Yeah. For Jerome, it's funny. He says he needed to be alone. And I do think there's much validity to that. Mm-hmm. I think I needed to experience just men. I needed to meet good men, because I didn't think that they existed. And so once I finally was able, obviously through copious amounts of therapy and reading and education, I started to see, like, okay, I was making the wrong choices. So I think everyone's different, but I think it starts with education.
Right. I agree with
100%.
that. But the key is that the good part about us not being the same is that we all, with our different lessons that we have learned and what we've all experienced, we know that there's somebody else that is exactly like us. And that's the key, is that, when, like we said earlier, when we think that everybody is alone, there's nobody who's truly alone. But there's always going to be somebody who will signify and be like, oh my gosh, like you said, that's my story. I'm that person. Mm-hmm. I've been through this. I've done that, I can't understand why I don't love myself. And all of us have gone through that journey of self-love, whether we want to admit it or not. And it's still a constant journey, because self-love is something that's laughed at, whether you've been through issues or not. You know, when you hear something, when you say, hey, I want me time, that me time means I need self-love. I need that time, you know, to deal with myself and whatever it is I'm going through. Because one thing I've learned, Jerome, like you were saying, that, you know, when you have time to sit there and just learn about who you are and understand the type of person you are and what you've gone through, you know, it really is an eye opener. It's really scary to look at through that mirror and realize, oh my gosh, this is what I've been doing, you know, all these years. And it's not about whether you're, you know, you're not a bad person or anything like that. It's just realizing that everything that you've learned, it's not that it's bad, but at the same token, it's like, why do I have to prove to somebody and give them something in order for them to love me? You know, and that's because we live, in my opinion, we live in a society that tells you, well, if you do this and you do that, you'll be accepted. You know, if you say this or you say that, then, you know, you're a good one. You know, why do we have to constantly feel we have to go down that path in order to be loved? And the other thing is that, you know, people use the word love, you know, the 4-letter word, like it's just nothing. Nobody really even looks at the true meaning of what that word even stands for.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and it is a journey, and it's hard to see, you know, those things. It's hard for me to see those things in myself that allow those things to happen. But getting to the other side of it, I feel so much better. So you know, so that uncomfortableness is, for me, worth it, you know, because I feel like I'm better for it. And I am not ready to be in a relationship right now, or I'm not looking. If, you know, if something came forward, I would be okay with it. But it's not a point where I'm like, oh, I have to be with someone right now.
Right.
And in the future, I'll be in a much better position to go, okay, I'm bringing my best. Is that person bringing their best? You know, if they're not, it's not like, okay, well, I can help them, or I can fix this, or I just need to show them. You know, it's like, no, if, you know, we both bring our best. And if that's not happening, then it's you know, then it's not going to work.
Right. Because at the end of the day, you realize Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, we all could stand to say yes to ourselves a lot more.
Right.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. And my thought process was that, you know, at the end of the day, we can't fix people. And that's a big problem, you know, especially as women. And then now to hear it on the other side as men, is that we're constantly trying to fix people. We can't fix everybody. Whoever they are who they are in their journey. That's their personality. That's for them. It just may not be suitable for us as individuals going through our journey and knowing who we are and what we want in our lives.
And, you know, it's a lot of us we help people. That's what we feel our mission is. And we, you know, want to be a project manager. Like, to me, that used to be, I see on the surface that this person could be amazing. And I just want to project manage this person. And I want to take them under my wing. And it's like, I have learned that, like, that does not ever work. And that is not my role. I have 2 kids. I don't need somebody else.
I just got to clean them up a little bit. I just got to, you know.
Right.
Smooth down those rough
polish
edges.
them. Yeah, smooth them out.
then they'll be fine. Well, yeah, that's my thing too. It's like, okay, if you're not a complete whole person, you know, if you've got some work you need to do, then I'm not up for that.
Exactly.
Again.
Exactly. Right. You said again. Yeah.
Again. Right.
Yeah. Again. Right. I'm not up for that.
I did that.
Right.
Been there, done
it,
that.
not doing it again. Right. Exactly. So I want to learn a little bit more though about your business as well, Constance, and, you know, talk a little bit more about the gym and how that came about and what made you, you know, come up with the terminology, you know, hey, you know, you have this badass concept. I want to hear a little bit more about that.
You know, that's my tagline is ignite your inner badass. And I came up with that tagline because I had so many broken souls walk through the door, sit down with me, and just like, they're just defeated. And I get a lot of women who have kind of give into their careers, give into their partners, give into their children, and have nothing for themselves. Mm-hmm. They have no self-care routine. They have no exercise routine. Their nutrition has gone to complete hell. And I'm watching these people, and it's like there is a spirit in there, and you've just lost it. And I see it. I always tell people, I see it before you see it. I need to help these people, show them that they have that in them, that oomph, that, drive, that moxie. I don't know what you'd want to call it. But once people start to see some type of change in their body, they feel better, they look better, their entire lives are going to change. And a lot of that comes with starting to get rid of toxicity, whether it's in their food, whether it's in, I'm not happy in this career, I need to make a change. Jerome and I talk about this all the time. When you start changing somebody's life through working out, it's amazing to see what sheds, not just the weight, but relationships, partners. I mean, it's amazing to me. And I think that that's why my tagline, it's not just about workout. We're also a community. I mean, we have women who are going through breakups and, just parenting issues, and everybody's a community. So it's like, where else do you really find that?
Right.
That's what the fitness studio is for me and for everybody else. I mean, we've had fundraisers, and we've been on the phone with people at 2 a.m, helping them out of, do you want to talk about domestic violence, talking them out of, serious situations. And I'm like, what other fitness studio owner is doing this right now? I mean, it's just
I've never heard of it.
You're not going to get that everywhere,
So, and I love how you make the connection across like a holistic health, a holistic well-being, and it will filter through other areas of your life.
It just naturally will, it really does. It really will. It's, Go ahead, Jerome.
Yeah, there's a ripple effect. Yeah, there's a ripple effect that goes across, because, each area of your life touches all the other areas of your life. And so, for me as a trainer, like years ago, I noticed, working with people, when someone's exerting themselves physically, sometimes the emotional comes out. And so they may talk about some things that they wouldn't share with other people. And so when I work with someone and those things come out, to me, it's sort of like attorney-client privilege, because I know that there's something about, exerting yourself that makes you, talk about those other areas of your life. And being in that vulnerable position, I feel like I need to protect them by, not saying, oh, hey, guess what I heard about, what she said, because, there is that ripple effect. And one part of your life gets better, and then you go, what about this other part? And then it does, each area does touch all the other areas.
Yeah, and that's true, because I think that they did, it took them years to get to where they're at. And when they walk through that door, they have to revisit every little part of what they've gone through and how they got there. So, if they came in and they're 200, 300 pounds, how did you get there? There's a reason. And all these, it's not just about the bad eating. There's something else that was triggering you to eat like that. So you're absolutely right. It's all
and
a
most,
journey. Go ahead.
Most of the time you get, oh, it's my thyroid. Oh, I don't, move as much. Oh, I snack on this. And it's like, nope. There's no way possible that, you're eating Friday night pizza and this is why you've gained 100 or so pounds. I laugh. I can attest to that. I was 18 years old when I was 18 when I found out I was pregnant, and with my daughter, and I gained 80 pounds. And I was like, okay, here she comes. And they're like, she's 6 pounds. And I'm like, whoa, where's the other, 70?
What's the rest of it?
Like, what do you mean? She's only 6 pounds. Like, what am I supposed to do with this weight? So I, looking back, was like, well, I was, I had cravings and I was nauseous, so food helped me. It was none of that. It was that I was 18 years old, and then I was like, my life is over. I can't go to college. I have to raise a child. and I have to get married, and this is it. This is my life. It's over. And so what did I do? Food,
Right. That was your comfort zone.
Well, and for, that's a good example. A lot of times, someone comes in and says they want to lose weight. It's not just about, okay, you just need to eat less and exercise. Sometimes there's other things, that you have to address before you can even, make progress in that area. Because if you had some things that were some other reasons, underneath it that helped you to get to that place, and you don't address those things, then you're not going to see the results on the other end.
Right.
And, I think sometimes, we sort of sometimes end up being therapists.
Right.
I feel like I should make more money than I do, but, you end up, trying to get people, to address that thing that makes them be in that position where they're going to, do those things that got them to that point.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I guess it's time, though, that all y'all go out and get your therapy license, because you're going to need to use them on yourselves first before you continue to use them on other people, okay? Yeah, you're right. And, and even, like I said, even with just the coaching, you're constantly, feel like you're being that therapist and just having constant conversations. And I know as a coach and, even a big part of what I do is, I want people to be able to amplify their voice, and being able to do that. Some people like to do it through the podcast or either writing their stories. And being an author, that's the thing that I've learned is that, boy, talking about being therapeutic. And that was the one thing that helped me, was being able to write that journey of what I had went through and know that, oh my gosh, I had to sit back and reread who I was, why this happened to me. And the same thoughts that you were saying, Jerome, was like, how could this happen to me? All I kept thinking was, I'm a strong woman, nobody's ever stepped over me like this. And to realize, oh my gosh, these are my weaknesses. So being able to write that down, and then even trying to go through therapy, I didn't last real long with the therapy because the therapist had never been through what I went through. And I think that was the thing that, as you were saying early on, Constance, that, if you haven't gone through that journey, it's kind of hard to tell somebody what they need to be doing. So for me, the writing was what was more therapeutic for me, and to get my voice out there and to be able to have these conversations, because some people just aren't going to talk to you, but if they can write it, I've really found that they've been able to share their stories in a way that they never thought that they could.
Well,
That's a great idea.
Do you feel like the words were on the paper before you actually really internalize where you were, or did you have it already before it went on paper? I don't know if that question makes sense or not.
Yeah, I think I kind of get.
Also, don't know. I'm.
Go ahead.
And I'm also. I guess I'm used to. I'm used to hosting a podcast. So I guess I don't know if I'm supposed to ask you questions or not.
No, I love it. Actually, that's a good question, because when I think about it, I think that after I read it, I realized I think a big part was I didn't know I was that person, but when I read it, it was like it was coming out so fast out of me that I was like, oh my gosh, this all this information that literally was pouring out of my head. I mean, I literally was writing the book in less than a week. In some of my books I wrote in less than 24 hours, because there's so many things that were going on mentally that I hadn't been able to share. I hadn't been able to discuss. And as we all think that when you're being abused, that when you don't talk, your whole focus is that you want to protect everybody else, and not realizing you're not protecting anybody. You're actually harming yourself and everybody else, not because they don't know what you're going through, right? So having that opportunity for me to write my story was like, I looked at it and I was just like, damn, I can't believe I'm even still here. That was the main thing that I had realized, was that it wasn't time for me to go, but I could not believe that, first of all, I had the strength to go through what I went through, and then to sit here on the other side and write it and read it over and over again, and telling people this story, and people look at me like, what? And then they'll say to me, well, I can't believe you can even move forward. I said, well, what am I supposed to do? I'm here. I'm living. There's a reason why I'm here. So to be able to sit down, I don't know if I answered your question, Jerome, but, to be able to sit down and kind of read.
No, absolutely.
That, and look at that. It was a hard thing. It really was very hard for me to understand that sometimes being and I guess for me, being too strong is not healthy. You know, so when you're used to having to feel like you have to wear the pants and you have to wear the skirt, that's not always that's not always the healthiest thing. And that's still something I struggle with, is having to be able to let go, be able to allow, you know, certain people in my life that I feel comfortable with. And that really is the hardest part with men is, you know, I got to be able to get past the BS. And if you can't get past the representative side, I can't be with you. Okay. So, you understand what I'm saying?
Well, and it's interesting. Oh, absolutely. And I think it's interesting what you're saying. I think a lot of times, like you said, you're strong, and, you know, but there's that thing where sometimes the things that are our strengths, you know, used in the wrong way can also, you know, be detrimental for us.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. There has to definitely be a balance, and I have to continuously learn that every day, because I'm so used to having to lead. I'm so used to having to be in the front. I'm so used to having to, you know, I've had to take care of my son. You know, everything's been put on my shoulders. So to be able to let go, that is a constant struggle. And so if you're trying to be in a relationship where I meet somebody that, you know, tries to, I don't know if I want to say outstrength me or have this kind of attitude, it just doesn't work for me, because I know who I am. And so I know that that's a constant journey that I have to, you know, to deal with. And, you know, even if you raise your voice to me too much, I'm done. I'm like, you know, I can't. It's just too much reminder of where I was at, and which I'm trying to, you know, to walk away from. So so that was a great question. So thank you for that question. Like I said, I get it. Being a podcast host, ask away. It's all right.
I love it.
All right. So, you know, we're definitely way past the 30 minutes, but I couldn't stop this conversation because I just love being able to talk. But I do want to know, Constance, so how can people, you know, get a hold of you? What is the process that you go through when you feel that you have to sit down, or somebody feels like they have to, you know, they come to you and they want to figure out what they're doing wrong, and how what's the process you go through to help them, you know, to communicate with you?
Sure. So communication, you can email me, and it's Constance, Constance, at hit-it-fitness.com. So it's Hit It Fitness with a dash in between, hit-it. It's very confusing. Or you can just go to my website, ConstanceContursi.com. Might make a lot more sense.
Yeah, because you just lost me there, okay?
I know, it's the whole thing. ConstanceContursi.com. You could probably find me right through there and message me directly.
Okay, that's cool. We'll absolutely put it in the DM, and we'll make sure we have all the information available
for
those to find you. So do you have like any special events, or do you do just everything just works through your business itself, or is there anything that you do outside of that in order to tie people into the business and be, you know, besides the podcast?
My life coaching is a little bit separated. Most of the stuff that I do, it goes straight through the business, but I do a lot of virtual training and virtual coaching. So, you know, all of that you can kind of just directly go through me with. But, you know, my business is tied into obviously very similar situations. I do nutrition help, and, you know, like people just sit down and say, I think I need a life coach. I don't know what one it is. I don't even know what it is. And we go through a whole questionnaire and try to figure out what it is people actually need. So sometimes people don't even know what they need.
Right.
They just need to sit down and figure it out. That's kind of what I do.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's awesome.
And so you guys, when is your, what time does your podcast come on? What days of the week? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Oh, that's a great question, Jerome.
Well, we put out a podcast about every other week, and just because of we both have a lot of things going on, it doesn't. It's not a set day, but you can find it at Too Fit to Be Tied. It's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I think it's on Google Podcasts. And just check us out.
All right.
Yeah, Jerome does all the work, work. I'm just the talent.
And for personal training, you can find me at JK4Fitness at yahoo.com. J as in Jerome, K as in Kite, the number 4 fitness at yahoo.com. And I do some in-home training, also some virtual training that I started doing during the pandemic. Because I still needed to make money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
yeah.
sir.
Go ahead. Natalie, we going to say something?
Oh, no, I was just saying, I totally understand that. And it's amazing that, that you were able to adjust for that too, to keep things going, to keep reaching your community and keep bringing business to yourself too.
Yeah, but I was going to ask me now that we, real quickly, we talk about the pandemic, how much did your business increase when it came down to the coaching? And, we did hear all through the pandemic how more and more domestic abuse had risen to the highest height it had been in many, many years because people were at home. They had to face each other every day. Did you find yourself, Constance, having to deal with more people during that time frame?
To be honest, no. I mean, people were kind of just hiding out for a while, and now everybody's emerging like, help. I haven't left my home. Now is when I feel like most people are struggling to take that first step. I feel like during the pandemic, I mean, we were shut down for 2 months out here, in Chicago. But we just kept rolling and, we had our regulars, but I think now more than ever, we're really seeing people emerge with major needs because they've neglected a lot of those for the last 2 years.
That is very interesting because it seemed like everybody to some degree went the complete opposite because people were stuck, and they needed to, relieve themselves, find ways to communicate. And then, like I said, there was more and more reports about the fact that domestic abuse was at its highest, and it just because people had no choice but to face each other and, realize that I either like you or I don't like you, and this is what we're dealing with, and then that wasn't all good. So, but it's interesting that people, had to hold on to that and, all that fear. And now they're trying to release all that fear because they feel a little safer or they feel like they have no choice. But, we're so thankful that we have you and Jerome there to make it all happen in your community. It's a blessing to have you guys, even though it may be some days hard, because I know as we all sit around as, own business owners, some days you just want to slap ourselves across the head and be like, why are we doing this? I know it's that constant journey. Like, what am I doing this for? But we realize, we're a vessel of some sort for somebody. And, every day that we want to walk away, we just move closer to you, and, we do realize that there are many people out here who need help. So before we end this evening, I want to give you all an opportunity to say your last words. So I'm going to start with Jerome first. So Jerome, give us your last words for the evening.
Oh. Wow. Well, thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm honored to be here. Thanks for letting me share my story. I learned a lot about you guys, and that's it. I think everybody should, stay on that journey of self-discovery, and don't look outside so much that you forget to look inside. Figure out who you are, and figure out how you need to grow as you're on the path.
Amen. All right. Love it. Yeah. Constance, you are next, my dear.
Oh, thank you. I think, the only advice that I would give is that, there are so many people in such tough situations and such toxic environments, and some of them are afraid to even educate themselves because you don't almost want to know the truth. And so I have had people where I'm like, just listen to this podcast, just read this book, and hey, if it's not you, then, you be grateful. But I think that educating yourself, finding something to your go-to, a group, a community, finding some way, some outlet, some safe outlet to just educate yourself is the first step to really getting healthy. And that's my key point. You can't expect something to change overnight, but starting to at least dabble in finding out about what domestic abuse is, finding out what toxic relationships are or narcissistic personality disorder, just educating yourself is the first step.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Just admitting it is more important than anything, because once you can admit it, then you can absolutely take those steps. So that's the key. And again, appreciate you, Natalie. Please, do you have any last words for us tonight, hon?
Yes, this conversation has been a real treat, but I will have to say that, there's a million different reasons to leave or stay, but I can tell you that when I finally left for myself, I never looked back. So when you choose yourself, you have put yourself on the next level, on another path that you cannot slip back into. So I would say that is one of the most important things, is to understand why you're doing what you're doing. And then when you choose yourself, you're on the path. You're going full speed ahead.
All right. Well, great words again. You guys, thank you so much for taking your time out and spending it with me this evening. It has been an amazing conversation. Like I said, it's sad that we had to come together in this journey of talking about domestic abuse, but I think it's the most important conversation because it's not talked about enough, and it happens every single day. It's not something to be celebrated, but it's absolutely something that needs to be communicated. So before we all close tonight's show, I hope you all learned how to better handle toxic relationships, health, domestic violence, and understanding your own personal experiences. And it always leads me to ask listeners to think about some things. And the question I have for you all tonight, if you're listening, is, are you hiding in the open, and are you ready to heal? So what are your dreams? If you have dreams, you can reach out to me anytime. If you just want to have a discussion, you can reach me at Kimberly at WSBILC@gmail.com, and let's chat about your dreams and then turn those dreams into goals. And if you want more of your resource for success, monetary donations to support the podcast are now accepted. We accept them on Cash App, PayPal, Good Pods Tip Jar, or you can go directly to the website at www.WSBILC.com. But again, we'd like to thank you all for listening in to us tonight. We'll be back next week with more amazing guests, and be sure to follow us on iHeartRadio or wherever you listen to your podcast. But until then, enjoy the rest of your evening, and good night.
Good night, everyone. We will be back next Thursday evening at 7 p.m. Follow us on Spreaker, www.spreaker.com/user/WSBI. View our new WSBI website anytime at www.wsbillc.com and on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram.